Okay, welcome to my live stream to the good people of YouTube. Now, I hope the audio is okay. You might just confirm it, will you, and leave a message down below. And I'll try and get through as many of those questions. I see a good few questions there already. You might confirm, though, that the audio is okay. Okay, welcome to my live stream. Now, I just need to turn off that. Okay, and I'm going to go through these questions as quickly as I can and deal with them as best I can. First question I see there is from, you might just confirm though, will you, that the audio is okay, that the sound is okay and the video is okay. I think it is, but you might just confirm, just leave a message there if you wouldn't mind. First question I see there is from Willie Walsh about wanting to buy a derelict property. What are the main things you need to look out for? Audio is good, that's great. Okay. Willie Walsh is inquiring, as you can see, about a derelict property. What are the main things you need to look out for, and how much in advance would you recommend having for booking consultants? I'm not so sure about the consultants. In relation to a derelict property, you need to be concerned about two main things. One, the services. So the services will be sewerage, water and road access. And the second thing you need to be concerned about is planning. Has the derelict property planning? Or is it an abandoned house that the person involved building it ran out of money and is now derelict? When did it start being constructed? The key thing is that it was built either before 1963 or after 1963. If it's a pre-63, planning is not an issue because the planning laws only came into effect in Ireland from, I think, the 1st of October 1963 or 1964, but basically if it's a pre-63 you're safe enough in terms of planning. If it is after 63 then you need to be concerned about planning. So really they are the things you need to be concerned about, services and planning. And just in relation to the other question there, would you recommend having for booking consultants? I'm not so sure what you mean by booking for consultants or what your question is there, but it is if it's a structural survey, you need to get as much work done as you can yourself, just in terms of doing a bit of legwork yourself, a bit of checking out and seeing exactly what's the story in relation to planning, seeing exactly what the story is in relation to services, and then and only then, if you're satisfied that everything seems to be good, then you'd spend a few bob getting a structural survey carried out, because before that you could be wasting your time, especially if there's any issue with access and that sort of thing. Hope that answers your question there, Willie. Now, DW Creative, Gareth Kenna from Northern Ireland, living in South Africa for the past 40 years. We've been looking at buying a farmhouse in Ireland for a while. Two questions. Is there such thing as a suspensive sale in Irish property, buying and selling? And if so, what is the time limit on a better offer? In South Africa, it is usually 72 hours. I've never heard, quite frankly, of a suspensive sale, so don't know what that's about. There's no difficulty buying and selling, but obviously, you know, they're two independent transactions. Now, you might try and tie in one with the other, and you might try to make your sale contingent upon a successful purchase, or you might make your successful purchase or your purchase contingent upon a successful sale. But suspensive sale, don't know what that is, quite frankly. Don't think there is such a thing in Ireland. In South Africa, the unspoken norm seems to be set a price with the agent higher than perhaps market-related value, on the understanding that as a seller you might settle for something just under. That's fair enough, but I mean that is the same the world over. It wouldn't be unique to South Africa, it wouldn't be unique to the UK or Ireland or America or anywhere else. You're going to set the best freaking price you can set and be realistic about it. So obviously you can set your price as high as you like, but clearly you're going to scare off a lot of people if you do that. Whereas you're more likely to get more fish in if you set your price realistically at the outset, and you might even generate an auction situation. And if you get an auction situation going, remember, all you need is two people for an auction. Then you're far better off than setting a very high price at the outset and then discovering that there's nobody interested except this one punter because you scared away everybody else. You want to throw a lot of breadcrumbs on the water, and if you do, you're going to get more fish. Sellers set a price online and expect to play the field to get a lot more. Am I wrong? Don't really know. I mean, it's very, very simple, straightforward situation. It's buyers and sellers. It's a market. You can set what you like. You can make an offer of what you like, but ultimately there has to be a coming to terms. There has to be agreed terms for a sale, and that's it. And it doesn't really make any difference. But as I say, if you set your price too high at the outset, you're going to scare away people, and you're not going to get punters. Tort law. Tom Casey asks, what is tort law? Tort is a civil wrong. So the likes of negligence or the likes of personal injury, they are civil wrongs. They're not criminal wrongs as such, and they are civil wrongs. I think tort is an old Latin or French word. It could be a French word. Thoughts on buying property subject to tenancy with details of tenancy unknown. I'd be very wary about that. Peter OJV. Thoughts on buying property subject to tenancy with details of tenancy unknown. This strikes me as an auction situation, or rather not even an auction, or perhaps an auction, but one of those forced sales or repossessing jobs where a bank goes in, repossesses the property, hands it over to a solicitor, obviously to do the legals, and they really don't have any details of the sitting tenant because the tenant may not be cooperating, and because the previous borrower is long gone and is not cooperating either. So you need to carry out your due diligence. There's nothing to stop you from going and actually knocking on the door and speaking with the tenant if you can, or if the tenant is prepared to speak to you. And if the tenant thought that he was getting a new decent landlord, well then perhaps he'll talk to you, you know. In that way you're going to suss out the situation. You're going to suss out the situation as to the tenancy being unknown, or what is the situation with the tenancy. Neyman Jane, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Your sale agreed, new house. Your solicitor is not clear of management company to be set up after the sale. She says title is weak. Can you explain of this is reason to worry? It is reason to worry, but you really should be talking to your solicitor. There's not much point talking to me, because clearly I do this for a living. I don't do it for the lulz, you know. And you have a solicitor, so if he or she is not giving you a good service, then I'm not going to remedy that. Bottom line is, it is something to be concerned about if your solicitor says title is weak, but you need to go back to your solicitor and talk to him or her in a business-like way and see exactly to what extent it's weak, what is the infirmity or imperfection, can it be remedied, and so on and so forth. So hope that answers your question, but I mean there's a limit to what I can do given that you already have a solicitor, you know. The accounting channel, does cryptocurrency follow the same tax rules as foreign currency, or is it considered a capital asset under capital gains tax? Haven't got a clue, quite frankly. Don't know. And I'm not sure what you mean by does cryptocurrency follow the same tax rules, because it depends on whether you're doing it for a living or you have the occasional capital gain perhaps, or the occasional disposal, in which case again might arise. You could be doing it for a living, you could be doing it as a trader. Not sure exactly what you're doing, or in terms of your cryptocurrency there. I'm not an accountant and I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty there. You, I see, have an accounting channel yourself, so perhaps you'd be in a better position probably to answer that question. But the likes of the tax laws in Ireland and cryptocurrency and so on, that's a complex bloody area, you know. So I'll have to defer or decline to answer that question. Peter OJV, auction, yeah, that's what I'll do, okay. Aside from the federal 12.5%, is there other corporate taxes regionally or perhaps local in Ireland? That's a question from Mystery Fire. I don't know what federal tax of 12%, 12.5% you're referring to. The tax on property in Ireland is a local property tax, and it is an annual charge based on the value of the property at a particular point in time, and it's an annual charge or an annual tax. In addition to that, there's a one-off transaction charge called stamp duty at the outset when you're buying the property. But federal tax of 12.5%, don't know what that is. I don't know what you're referring to there, and we don't even have a VAT rate of 12.5%. So Carla Dragic, does limited company need to have an employee in order to have a shop opened and sell their own handmade products? No, a limited company doesn't need to have an employee, but obviously it's going to need somebody to be dispensing or assisting with sales and having the shop open and so on. So the limited company Well, I suppose they would have an employee. I mean, the directors, for example, if you were a sole director and you're the only director of the company and you're the only shareholder, then you may not necessarily be an employee. You may be just the promoter of the business, or you may be a director, you may be the shareholder, and you may be doing everything yourself. And that's always, or that is often the situation in a situation where somebody is starting up a business and trying to do everything themselves at the outset. So I wouldn't be too concerned about whether you have an employee or not. I'd be more concerned about getting sales and finding punters and selling your stuff, whatever it is. Sam David. Hi Terry, what online brokers can you recommend with low brokerage fees? And if you buy and hold for the long term, should we be going for the safest broker likely to still around 20 plus years? Sam David is inquiring about low brokerage fees. The lowest brokerage fees or fees that I've come across is on the Gyro platform. I've done a video or two about the Gyro, and if you go to my YouTube channel you'll see it. It's an execution only service. It is cheap, no two ways about that. There's no bells and whistles, no frills, and you can buy and sell shares easily and quickly. As for being around in 20 plus years or not, I'm old enough and long enough in business to know that what we would have assumed would be around in 10 or 15 or 20 years has been thrown over big time in the last 10 or 20 years. For example, not too long ago, 10 or 15 years ago, Sean Quinn and Tony O'Reilly were the most wealthy men in this country, and Sean Quinn and Tony O'Reilly both went bankrupt in the last 10 or 15 years. So I'd be slow enough, quite frankly, to bet with any huge degree of confidence about anything being around in 20 plus years, because business by its nature has risks attached and ups and downs. But to go back to your original question, the Gyro is cheap and cheerful. I also use Davy Select, and not sure about their prices, to be honest with you, or their fees and rates and so on and so forth. I do buy and hold the shares for the long term, no two ways about that. I just buy them and let them sit and check them every now and again, but generally shares over time will perform well, as long as you don't get too cute. Mystery Fire, corporate tax rate 12.5%. What corporate taxes you're talking about? No, the corporate tax rate is the corporate tax rate, and that doesn't apply on a federal basis or a regional basis. It applies across the country. So if you have a company in Ireland trading and paying taxes and so on, you'll be paying at the standard corporation tax, which is applicable across all counties and all regions. Frank Trapp. Hi Terry, love the channel. What's your favourite part of law you like to practice? What gives you the most satisfaction? It's hard to know, Frank. I like the employment law and I like property as well, I must say, because I have a kind of a history with property and I have a love affair with property going back to 1986, actually, the 6th of December 1986 when I bought my first property. So I have a kind of a love affair with property, but I like employment as well. And sometimes employment is very, very frustrating, but sometimes you get a real sense, a real kick out of a particular case or a particular individual coming to you with a situation, and you know you can fix it, and you know that they have been treated very, very badly, and you know that all things being equal, you're going to get a result for them because it's a slam dunk sort of a situation. That's good. And I actually had such a case this week. Funnily enough, an individual was very badly treated by his employer and very badly ripped off, quite frankly. So that the likes of that case, I'd be taking on and going with it. I'd be going with it and looking forward to it, quite frankly, because what the employer in this particular situation was absolutely egregious. So that's it, Frank. I like property, I like employment, I like small business as well. I like the hustle, I like people starting businesses, and I like the entrepreneurship and stuff like that, you know. Killer 360, do you know much about Irish criminal law? I know enough about it to understand that crime doesn't pay, and so I steer clear of it. I do very little criminal law. I used to do a bit of criminal law. I don't do it anymore, and it's the one area of law actually that I don't do. I do everything else except criminal. So the likes of road traffic and the likes of criminal law, I don't bother with, quite frankly. If you had a bit of money, LD, if you had a bit of money, would you put it into the buying property, put it into bank savings accounts or shares? Cheers. I wouldn't put it into bank savings accounts. I'd either put it into shares or put it into property. And that decision would be determined by what stage in life I was at and what my career was like, if I had a career, what age I was, how much risk I wanted to take on, whether I was prepared and able to borrow or not. If I could borrow, if I was young and trusting and so on and so forth, and was prepared to borrow and had a few bob coming in as well, then I'd certainly be looking at property, because obviously the advantage of the few bob that you might have to invest in relation to property would be that the property, you can leverage whatever you get or whatever you're prepared to invest, and you can leverage it. And that way, if you make a good decision and make a good investment, the returns you're going to get are going to be significantly more than investing in shares. But shares over the long haul are quite good. No two ways about that, but I wouldn't be leveraging shares or leveraging or borrowing to buy shares, and I wouldn't be messing around with CFDs, contracts for whatever it is, difference or whatever, or CDs, the things that Sean Quinn got into difficulty with in his investment in Anglo-Irish Bank. Hope that answers your question there, LD. Now, Pizza Expert. We are a group mostly in North America looking to possibly incorporate in Ireland. Aside from the points made in your how to incorporate video, are there other considerations we should have? Not really. I mean, it depends what you're going to do in Ireland. It depends what you're going to do in Ireland, but you do need to take legal advice about the directors. I think there is a stipulation there that you're going to need either Irish or EU directors. There might be some stipulation there, but if you're going to incorporate in Ireland, there's no big deal. Quite frankly, you can go online, go to Google, do company formation, search for company formation or fast company formation. There's no difficulty setting up a company in Ireland. And after that, then you're off to the races, presuming that you've got a business. Stephen Brady. Hi Terry, how are you, Stephen? How are you? Mark Sweetman. Is now a good time to buy a home in your opinion, or is the property market dysfunctional? My view, Mark, for what it's worth, and I've seen a good bit of ups and downs, but it's only an opinion, and like butts, everybody has an opinion, everybody has a butt. My view is it's not dysfunctional. My view is that it is a good time to buy a property, but that's just my view, especially one for your home, especially if you're not speculating or taking a punt or getting stuck in like I did a few years ago and bet the farm on property and got badly burnt and so on. If I was buying a house now, I'd have no hesitation whatsoever buying a house if I could get my hands on a few bob of a mortgage and I had a job, etc., etc. Because long-term properties are, in my view, a good investment. Because A, you've got the capital appreciation, B, you have a roof over your head, C, you can enjoy the society of your family and friends and have a base, and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of a no-brainer. And then in Ireland, the tax situation in relation to property and buying property and so on, and writing off the interest on your loan or your mortgage and so on, is fairly beneficial. It's fairly good. So I wouldn't have any problem, but I mean the question is now a good time to buy a home in your opinion? If I was a young fella, like I don't know what age you are, Mark, but I mean if I was starting out in life, or I was in my 20s or in my 30s, and I was able to buy a property and hadn't got a home, I would buy one, yeah, absolutely. Brian Kelly, can you transfer a liquor license within the county? Thanks Terry, your website's very helpful. I was studying. Brian Kelly, you can transfer a liquor license around the country, because I did it a few years ago, where I sold a licence that I had in a pub in Cavan, and I sold it, and it ended up in Waterford in either a Lidl or an Aldi. So I don't think there's any difficulty in selling a licence, but the value of them compared to a few years ago has gone down a lot. I understand, and let's face it, the whole COVID-19 situation and the difficulties that pubs are facing is going to mean probably that there's going to be a glut of liquor licenses on the market in the not too distant future, because unfortunately for many people this could be the final blow, as it were, in the licence trade, or certainly in a rural place, you know. Crime doesn't pay unless you're junior or senior counsel. You're absolutely right there, but I mean, look, whatever floats your boat. Fergal or FE1 candidate here. Any advice you could give to someone looking for a training contract and experience? Fergal, you just need to make yourself useful. You need to make yourself useful for whoever you're proposing to or looking for a contract. But I mean, it is like a lot of things. It's a question of knocking on doors, sending out applications, and keep showing up, because the very first thing that you need to do is show up. And if you do get a chance, I would recommend that you show up consistently and on time, because lads like me who have a thing about time, etc., one thing that really pisses us off is a fella that can't show up on time, or a girl who can't show up on time. Because if you're going to do anything at all in the world, the very first thing you need to do is show up. Michael O'Donnell, hi Terry, do you think that capital acquisition tax threshold will be raised soon? There was talk of it a few months ago. Haven't a clue, Michael, and I'm not going to speculate. LD, thanks Terry, really helpful. I'm 57 and will be looking to have an income. What's this your question was now, LD? Oh yeah, property and savings or accounts or shares. You'll be looking, if you're 57, you're of a similar vintage to myself, then clearly the question of borrowing money and speculating in property, or certainly leveraging your money, is probably going to be closed off to you. But maybe you've plenty of cash, maybe you have a pot of gold, as it were, and maybe you can invest. But I mean, if you're going to invest, you could buy, I suppose, even at 57, there's no difficulty, I wouldn't think, in getting a commercial loan for an investment property. And the investment market, the investment property market, or the rental market, certainly in Ireland, is fairly strong, obviously due to the shortage of houses, the shortage of housing stock, and the crisis since the property crashed there a few years ago. Declan Donnelly, hi Terry, as a first time buyer at 45, should I keep my mortgage length to a minimum, e.g. 15-year mortgage? Probably, Declan, it would make good sense if you could afford that, but if you can't, you can't. And it's a personal preference. It depends on how much income you're coming in, or you have coming in, and it depends on the level of mortgage you're getting as well. You could be buying a house down the country in the likes of Longford or someplace where I have a little bit of property, and you could buy a house relatively cheap, and your mortgage could be small enough. So it depends on yourself, but obviously, yeah, the sooner you can pay your mortgage off, the better, and the sooner you can accelerate the end of it, as it were, the better. So 15 years is better than 20 or 25, no two ways about it. And obviously you're going to pay less interest over the period of time, Martins Racinas, hello Terry, if I want to buy out freehold through arbitration procedure, how long time could it take averagely? Don't know how long exactly, Martins. I did it once there before and ended up, I think, in the circuit court looking for an order, or looking for the county registrar to sign over a property or a freehold or something, a long leasehold. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Can't answer that question. It depends, I suppose, on the other party or parties as well, and how agreeable they are, and how slow they are in responding, and so on. So just can't really answer that question. That's like asking how long is a piece of string. Creeper Hunter TV, season S4S, for a decent non-junior lawyer in commercial law, what's the going hourly rate for legal advice in your area? In my area, non-junior lawyer, don't really know what you're asking there. I mean, the hourly rate for a solicitor is going to range, I suppose, from probably 250 plus VAT an hour to whatever, Probably you're looking at €250 plus VAT per hour, though, as an hourly rate. Hope that answers your question. Breach Braheny, hi Terry, can you discuss the hiring of independent contractors? What agreements should be put in place? You need, obviously, an agreement in place as to the terms that are going to be agreed between you and the independent contractor, and that's a matter of negotiation between the parties. But the independent contractor then, if they are genuinely independent and self-employed, they might provide the contract, and they might set out basically the services that they're going to provide, the basis on which they're going to provide them, the rates, the termination of the contract, how it's going to come to an end, what notice period is in order from both parties, and how disputes will be resolved, and so on. So it's just a question of negotiating, and it's a question of basically making terms between the parties. So you could get a solicitor, obviously, to do your contract, but obviously it'll depend then on the exact nature of the deal and the exact terms and conditions that the parties have agreed, you know. John Sharkey: hi Terry, I'm 16 and I'm looking to start a business which involves a lottery licence. What legal issues will you run into? You're going to run into a big issue there in relation to a lottery licence, because you're going to need to get a lottery licence, and I don't think that's going to be easy at all. I got a lottery licence there last week for GA Club, and we do it every year because they sell GA tickets or sell lottery tickets to raise money for the GA Club. And there is a procedure through which you must go, and an application has to be made to the district court and so on, and you have to get the consent or approval of the local superintendent. So getting the lottery licence in your own account, I don't think, quite frankly, it's going to happen. And I think if you want to start a business, John, you're 16, if I was you, I'd be looking at other options, either providing a service or providing goods, or perhaps property or whatever, you know. Anyway, it's up to yourself, whatever floats your boat. Sam David: thanks for the brokerage advice. Not so sure what the brokerage advice was. I'm 25. Do you have any advice for young people to get on the property ladder? My advice for young people to get on the property ladder would be to get onto it as quickly as you can, quite frankly. That would be my personal preference and my view, because the earlier you start, the better. And the earlier you start, the earlier you're going to perhaps raise a bit of equity or and feel the benefit of leverage, feel the benefit of paying down a mortgage, and so on and so forth. Michael O'Donnell: hi Terry, do you have any tips on screening potential tenants? Yes, I do. Get references, and get real references from former landlords. It's as simple as that. Endre Fide: where would you buy a second investment property if you had to choose between Galway or Dublin? We have a property outside Galway already. I wonder where to buy the second one. We live in Norway. Well, it depends, I suppose, how you are organising and so on. I mean, maybe if you have a property in Galway and you're in Norway, clearly you must have somebody managing it for you there. So it might make sense to have your other property in Galway as well. It might just make sense from a logistical point of view. Galway is a very good city, very, very good city in terms of property, I understand, and it's a sound place to be buying property, investment property, because you've got UCG there, you have the university there, and you have a good bit of industry, pharmaceuticals around. So, you know, from the point of view of logistics and so on, I presume you have somebody there managing for you, and you may well have other local professionals who do a bit of work for you, or maintenance, that sort of thing, if that's the case. Or you might just have a local auctioneer looking after it. It might make sense to buy in Galway again, but look, it's up to yourself. Is there property tax on derelict buildings? No, there isn't. There's perhaps, I think there might be a property tax on derelict sites in the city centre or something like that, or else there's talk about it. But derelict building in the countryside, rural property or wherever, no, there's no property tax. Well, there's no different property tax. The usual property tax. So you're going to have property tax on any property in Ireland. You have local property tax depending on the value of the property, etc., etc. Now, there may be an exemption for it as well. It'll depend on the situation, but generally there's nothing extra by reason of the fact that it is a derelict building. Good morning, Terry. I'm looking into having a job as a security man. That's Meg Aturu. Good for you, Meg. Hope you get the job. My lease for the property, Martin's Racinas, is 999 years and the rent is £4 a year. Was wondering, can the landlord increase the rent? because in the lease is nothing said about increase. I don't believe so, Martins. No, I don't believe so. Although, have a look at the lease. To be honest with you, the lease will tell all, because it will make provision for, and it'll set out exactly how long the rent is going to be at £4 a year and how long it's going to last and so on. There might be provision, but if there is any provision for an increase, it'll be very, very small, you know. Ashit Riang, sir, in Ireland, which is the expensive property to buy? Which is the expensive property to buy? Ashit Riang, I don't know where you are from, but wherever you're from, you're going to stumble across cheap properties and you're going to stumble across expensive ones. And, you know, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. Which is the expensive property to buy? Declan Roach, hi Terry, during adverse possession, how long do you give the other side to respond before submitting to the PRA? Not sure who you're referring to, Declan, what other side. Generally, you'll be laying claim to a property and you'll be doing it on the basis that you have taken the property and excluded everybody else, including the registered owner, for a period of over 12 years or whatever it is. And once all of the proofs are in order, as it were, and once your application is ready to go in, you submit it to the Property Registration Authority, and they then contact anybody who might be affected, perhaps adjoining landowners and so on and so forth, with a view to checking the affidavits, any affidavits that might have gone in as well. Angela, I hope that answers your question, Declan. Angela, Terry, have you heard about an app which logs a person's last will and testament so that there's no ambiguity about where the will is kept? Are solicitors aware of this service? I've never heard of that, Angela, to be honest with you. No, I've never heard of that, and to be honest with you, it would make a good sense to have something, because to be honest with you, the current system seems to be absolutely ridiculous. I get emails regularly from other solicitors who, maybe somebody passed away in the parish and you have a solicitor acting for the executor or acting for somebody in the family, and they're writing to every solicitor in the area asking, is there a will, you know? Whereas if there was some sort of an app to track it and so on, it'd be very, very useful. Obviously, though, there's no difficulty with the person who makes the will telling the executor where the will is. So, Terry, your audio is crackling very loudly. Jeez, I don't know. Maybe I'm too close to it. How is it now? Hi Terry, do you take on trainee solicitors? I don't. Mr. Name, the issue is rectified for me as well. Hopefully the video or the audio is okay. I don't know why it would be crackling. It was good earlier on anyway. Mr. Crowley, you have been aired. Mr. Name, shut up. Martins Racinas, if you would buy a property, would you buy a leasehold property with more than 900 years left on it, or would you prefer freehold? It really wouldn't make any difference, Martins. There's no difference really between, in effect, a leasehold property with more than 900 years left on it and the freehold. The only thing is, with the freehold, you don't have to buy out the ground rent or whatever, but, you know, to all intents and purposes, the two interests in the property or in the land are pretty much similar, you know. You almost pronounced my name right. Good stuff, Andre. Buy now in Galway or wait till 2021. I see some prices are dropping on houses for sale in the city. It's hard to know, Andre. I mean, I'm not a soothsayer, or I don't have any crystal ball. I mean, let's face it, the COVID pandemic situation is having an impact, and clearly is going to cost, or it's going to cause, or has caused, obviously already, a recession. But whether you hold on or buy now or hold on for 6 months, don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference. I can't see the market tumbling in the next 6 months, but who knows? Maybe you are happier and feel safer waiting, but this is delayed ridiculously. Username. Declan Donnelly says audio is fine. Summer Gomez. Hi Terry, I love you. I have an issue. My bush is really itchy. We may have... Would you advise against removing a tenant under a 7-day notice? I read a clause which allows for it in case of assault and antisocial behaviour. Could you see any drawbacks in doing this? Well, you need to go through the PRTB situation, Michael. I can't remember offhand just the exact procedure you need to adopt. I know for antisocial behaviour the law is strict enough, alright, and does give the landlord a fair degree of power. But having said that, the RTB redresses the thing in favour of the tenant to a great extent. So what is your favourite sport, Mr. Gorry? Or my favourite sport is GAA football or hurling, and both of them are sports. Meg Aturu, please Terry, please, do you know if it's difficult to get a security job? Don't know, haven't a clue. Martins Rosinas, I asked about lease increase because in UK I heard some leases are attached to inflation, which means once the inflation grows, the lease grows accordingly. Yeah, that's the case, alright, and most leases, the rent review will see the rent increasing by the consumer price index. But I mean, if the consumer price index is 3 or 4% per annum and you're starting off at £4 per annum, you're not going to look at or see a huge increase in your rent, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it, you know. So that's it. No more questions there at the moment. A lot of questions about property. I'm always fascinated to see the interest in Ireland in property. There's clearly a huge interest in it, and of all the other topics that I cover on the channel, 40% have expressed a preference. I did a poll there not too long ago of 40% of people wanted to see more videos on property and so on. So that is interesting. What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur? To a young entrepreneur, I would say get punters. Get punters. And by get punters, I mean get sales. So sell whatever it is you're selling. Test your product. Test your service. Get sales. Then worry about the structure. Then worry about partnership or limited company or all that other good stuff. But if you get sales, and you get sales in significant quantities, you can fix all the other stuff or put it right very, very easily, because you can buy the expertise. But a lot of people contact me looking for advice about the correct structure, the setup for their business, and they want to incorporate in America and all sorts of stuff. And I say to them, have you sold anything? And they say no. I'm going to sell X, Y or Z. But like, if you're going to sell X, Y or Z, or if you're going to provide a service or goods or whatever, go ahead and do that. But do it in sufficient quantities that you can then worry about the structure. But until then, I wouldn't worry about it, you know. What is the average length from first offer on a house until key is in your hand? I would say that the average time would be probably 2 months, 3 months. It will depend, but realistically, that's probably the average. ST Usher, Stephen, thoughts on a 5-day per week commercial lease. Landlord uses the building for education at weekends, as will we Monday to Friday. I would be a bit concerned about that, Stephen. I'd be a bit concerned about that. It would be unusual that you wouldn't have possession for the full 7 days. Strictly speaking, that is probably more of a license situation. And if it was a license and you've got it for 5 days and it suits you, that's fine. But if I was you, I'd be ensuring that you can get out of Dodge very, very easily, because at the outset it may look like something that might agree with you or might suit you, but long term it's something that it could be awkward and it could give rise to problems because, well, look, you know yourself probably. So if I was you, I'd be wary enough of it. Obviously, if it was a premises then that you're really interested in, well and good, you're probably looking at a license to wouldn't invest in big money in a lease, and then you've the problem of perhaps fitting it out, putting in equipment and so on and so forth, and then ending up, if it's a license, with fairly short shelf life, as it were, in it, a fairly short tenancy. Johnny Long, is it possible to have a 6-month probation period with a 6-month fixed contract? Doesn't sound right to me. My wife has just been offered those terms. Greatly appreciated. Well, Johnny, it is possible. Yeah, it is possible. And obviously your man is not taking, or whoever the employer is, the would-be employer, he's not taking any chances. You could have a 12-month fixed term contract, quite frankly, and you could have a probation period that's 6 months, extendable to 11 and a half. So it's broad, it's as broad as it's long. There's no difficulty with it from a legal perspective, quite frankly, But I mean, obviously, you're going to have a hard time getting good people if you're offering a 6-month contract and the whole time is you're on probation. Obviously, from the employer's perspective, you're probably not going to get a huge amount of people interested. So it's up to your wife then whether she wants to. The accounting channel. What would a bank require from you if you wanted to get a loan to purchase investment property? You want capital. The bank will require capital, and they'll require they need to see obviously that you have resources, finances of your own, which will allow you to do the deal and which will allow you to give them sufficient protection and security. So they're not going to loan you the usual 90 or 95%, whatever it is that it is for residential mortgages. It's going to be less for a commercial. It's going to be a shorter period of time as well, and you're going to have legal costs for the bank to pay. But they're going to look for a significant enough amount of money from you to be able to put into it. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. Are you planning on buying more shares on the Gyro? Love these videos. Thanks, Declan. I probably will buy some more shares when the time is right. But at the moment now, to be honest with you, I have enough of them. I have enough just at the moment, but I probably will. Martins Racinas. My solicitor will send all the property documents and deeds to land registry. Yes, this is the first time for this property registered. How long time could it take to register? What they said, it could take 12 months. It could actually take 12 months, and it could take longer, but it depends on the property, Terry, I like your bookshelf. The artwork is nice. James Crowley. Thanks, James. The CRO is the official government registry for creating a business. The pizza expert. The company's registration office registers companies, not necessarily for creating a business, but for registering companies, or you can register business names and so on and so forth at the CRO, Companies Registration Office. That's cro.ie. Obviously, you'd have to register then with the revenue commissioners for taxation purposes and register as an employer and so on and so forth as well. But CRO is where you would ordinarily register a limited company. Thanks, Johnny Long. Thanks, Terry. Love the t-shirt. Good stuff. That's the Zen Buddhist philosophy. In order to reach enlightenment, you should do the work that matters. Do stuff that matters. Focus on the essentials. So that involves, for most people, at its most basic, or certainly for Zen Buddhist monks, chopping wood and carrying water. And they say in the Zen Buddhist philosophy that if you want to maintain enlightenment, you guessed it, chop wood and carry water. So that's what that's about. The gyro videos are great. Well, the gyro videos are just straightforward, buying the shares and holding on to them, If no employees, is it still required to register as employer? Not if you are not don't have any employees, there's no need to. But obviously with a view to the future, you might consider consider registering. But you're obviously going to register for probably register for VAT then as well if you have sales and turnover, you know. Questions have dried up there now, or else my thing is not refreshing. So that's it. I've answered all the questions as best I can. If you have any more, stick them into that thingamajig there, into that live chat thing, and I'll try and answer them. But yes, have you ever dabbled in the self-catering holiday home market? I haven't, Michael. No. And we're running out of questions there now, so if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in there, and you can I'll do my best to answer them. What book are you reading at the moment? I know you love reading. Yes, what book I'm reading at the moment? I am reading a book by Trollope called, it's about Phineas Finn. He's an Irish member of Parliament. It's based in the 1850s, 1860s. It's written by, I think it's Anthony Trollope. Anthony Trollope, I was just looking up there last week, actually worked as a civil servant in County Offaly way back in the day. But I'm listening now as well to a very, very good book of his called The Way That We Live Now. So I'm listening to Trollope and I'm reading Trollope at the moment, because The Way We Live Now is very, very good, very, very funny, beautiful writing. So that's what I'm listening to, and that's what I'm reading. I'm reading something to do with Phineas Finn is your man's name. He's an Irish guy from County Clare who ends up as a member of Parliament. So I've only read about 40% of it at the moment. Once my interest is on properties registered with land registry, is it stronger than deeds registry? The land registry is probably a little bit stronger insofar as land registry title is guaranteed by the state, whereas registry of deeds is not, and registry of deeds doesn't actually register title as such. Registry of deeds, and this is a little bit confusing, registry of deeds is a register of deeds, whereas land registry is a register of title, and the title is guaranteed by the state. So registry of deeds is well and good, but land registry is better because it registers title, and as I say, title is guaranteed by the state. Could you talk a bit about the worst case legal obligations on landlords where the house may not have the correct fire exits, or where, for example, there's no electrical cert, etc., etc.? My experience is that local authority inspectors come round and they will carry out an inspection of a rented property, and they will serve you with a notice for improvements, and they'll give you a list of stuff that needs to be improved. So that's basically what happens there. Obviously it's open to them then that if you ignore them and don't carry out the necessary improvements and don't conform with the regulations, then you could be looking at the district court or wherever. But obviously you will get time and you will get warning about it. If one purchases a property, Andre, if one purchases a property with poor BR rating, what is the most cost effective way to improve the rating? Insulation or solar systems? You'd want to ask an insulation guy about that, but I would have thought not the solar system, insulation. The likelihood is that you can improve it significantly by improving the insulation. In other words, if you go the solar system route and the heat or the energy and so on is being generated, etc., but it's disappearing out through the walls or out through windows and doors and so on and so forth, because of poor insulation, well then that seems to defeat the purpose of the solar thing. So I'd go insulation if I wanted to improve it. That would be just my view, but I would recommend, and I always recommend, that you actually get legal advice from a solicitor, but you get other advice from other people as well, and that makes sense. And never take medical advice from a solicitor, never take legal advice from a doctor. Kieran O'Donoghue. Hi Terry, like your channel. How many years of college does it take to become solicitor? For a mature student, what entry route would you take? Thanks. I entered as a mature student, and it took me about 2 years to qualify as a solicitor, but I was very, very highly motivated, and I telescoped exams and training and everything into a very, very short period of time. I did it as a mature student as well, only a few years ago there, so I'm well familiar with the working as a mature student or studying as a mature student and so on. So it's possible, if you have a primary degree, to do it fairly quickly, but you will need to get the FE1s, pass the FE1s. That's the foundation exam one to get into the Law Society, professional practice courses, and without that you're not going to get an apprenticeship, and so on and so forth. So that is your primary focus at the outset. It should be anyway. Martin's Racinus. If I have a dealing number, registering process, what kind of information can I get from it? Nothing. You just get a confirmation basically that your dealing has gone in. You can probably get a copy of the dealing if you want, and you can see what documents have been submitted as part of that dealing. That's really all. Declan Donnelly, dividends from shares. If this is reinvested and not withdrawn from trading account, is tax still due on this? Wouldn't be that well up in the tax situation there, Declan. Really don't know. Don't know the tax situation. And again, I use an accountant or get an accountant to do the tax for me, and that's it. Pay the tax once a year. Martin's Racinus. And does the land registry checks the documents from Registry of Deeds before they finish the process? Sincerely, Martins, the best solicitor in Ireland I've ever met. I'm the best solicitor you've ever met, Martins, and yet you went and instructed somebody else in relation to your property. Anyway, the land registry, I don't know what they do in terms of checking the documents from Registry of Deeds, but they will certainly peruse the documents fairly carefully and closely, and won't do first registration without seeing the documents are in order and so on. But to be honest with you, there's a certain element of the solicitor certifying title as well, to a great extent, and I would imagine that the form that the solicitor fills in making the application for first registration, there's two different ways of doing it, but the normal way is one which involves the solicitor basically kind of certifying title. So I'd say that probably gives land registry a little bit of an out in terms of any infirmities or imperfections that might arise. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what happens there. Now we're getting towards the end of it. Anyway, if you like this live stream, I'd appreciate if you give it a thumbs up down below, give it a like, and if you are interested in more live streams, let me know in the comments there. Paul Goggin, buying a house with no money and no rent to buy, is it possible? Buying a house with no money and no rent to buy, is it possible? Not really sure what you're asking there, Paul, but it's difficult to buy anything with no money, because obviously, without being trite, money makes the world go round, and people tend to want money for their assets if they're disposing of them. So not really sure what you mean there. Maybe you're referring to getting 100% mortgage or something like that. Not sure about the rent to buy situation either. I mean, you might be able to enter into some sort of arrangement with the local authority, but even the local authority loan, and I'm dealing with a couple of local authority loans at the moment where people are buying through the local authority. Without deposit, Paul Goggin, buying a house with no money and no rent to buy, is it possible without deposit? Without deposit. Well, normally you need to pay a deposit, but it's not a game deal breaker if you don't have a deposit, because obviously if the seller is satisfied enough, or the seller's solicitor is satisfied enough that you have the money and can do the deal, well then that won't be a deal breaker. But generally, if you buy a property, you sign a contract and you pay 10%, and that's the way it works. Does it mean the solicitor takes responsibility for what information to provide the land registry? I mean, if someone starts a claim for the property, the solicitor could be responsible for. Not really sure, for not checking it. Not really sure what you're asking there, Martins. Obviously there's a certain element of risk for solicitors, and they're signing off and certifying title to a certain extent. And there is an application. There's two different types of application, and one of them does involve the solicitor kind of confirming that they've certified title and they've inspected title and so on and so forth. So there is an element of putting it, but I wouldn't get down too much into the weeds in relation to that. Michael McLaughlin, thanks Terry, I would love for you to do another live stream. Oh, good stuff. Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Thanks for showing up today. Thanks for all the questions. It's lively. It has been lively. Huge amount of questions again on property. That doesn't surprise me. Give it a thumbs up down below. I would appreciate it big time. And as I say, let me know in the comments then as well if you want me to do further live streams, and how soon and so on and so forth. The last one I think I did was in May, and Another live stream would be great. That's good. Okay. Well, look, I hope you all are sustaining and bearing up okay with this COVID-19 situation, this pandemic. It's a freaking disaster, there's no doubt about that, and it is very, very difficult. It's hard on the mental health and so on and so forth as well. I mean, let's face it, it's tough, and not being able to leave the country, not being able to go to the local pub for a pint and so on is absolutely desperate. But hopefully things will improve, and hopefully we'll see a vaccine perhaps, Great stuff. Thanks for all the encouragement. As I say, give a thumbs up down below if you think it's useful, and if you've enjoyed it. And I'll be signing off. John Van de Beek. They say there is a housing crisis in Ireland. I, however, still see huge houses for the price of a new car. Is this due to the lack of work? Well, if you see a huge house for the price of a new car, it depends on what part of the country and so on. But the problem probably in Ireland is there is a housing crisis, but there is a lot of houses as well that are probably empty around the country, and the problem is that the houses were probably built in the wrong places. So we probably need more houses in Dublin and in the cities, and they are prohibitively expensive to buy sites and develop. And then there's other parts of the country where people would only be too happy to see the bit of development going on and see houses occupied and so on. So there is a bit of a dichotomy, there is a bit of a contradiction there and an inconsistency, but that's the way it is. No market, I suppose, is perfect. Markets are by definition imperfect, and that's what's happened in Ireland. I mean, I was involved myself in properties in Longford, etc., and certainly when I built my properties 10 years ago or whenever, prior to the Celtic Tiger crash, it wasn't exactly the belly button of the universe from the point of view of selling properties, whereas a number of years later then there's a housing crisis because all the builders basically and developers went tits up and are beginning to recover somewhat at this stage. Anyway, I think I'll draw to a close there now. We're nearly 1 o'clock, and I'll just check and see is there any more questions, just to be sure that I try to answer every single question. As I say, thanks for showing up and supporting the channel. Make sure to hit the old like button there if you like the live stream, and I will do another one in the not too distant future. So thanks for your support, and I think I'll end it there now. Thanks a lot. Have a good Saturday. Have a good day.